Hello guys, thank you for watching my channel. This is a full-length instructional video. It's for a Savage Axis Trigger Kit. This kit comes to us today from Wesbaun Gun Springs. That's Wesbaun, WESBAUN.com. They have a lot of things on their website, please check them out. They have kits for many other types of firearms. Some of their best-selling kits are the 3.5 pound AR-15 Trigger Spring Kit. Also the S and W SD series trigger kit. They also have things for the 1911 full-size government model, Glocks, Caltech Sub 2000, Mossberg, Remington, Ruger, Sig Sauer, which I'm kind of interested in, along with some other goodies on there. Of course, today we will be installing the Savage Axis kit. And just to let you know that we took the average of 3 trigger pulls, which was a 8.9 right out of the box. After I installed the trigger kit, it was a 2.49, so I just pulled on the spring a little bit. It stiffened up to a 3.29 pound trigger pull average, and I'm very happy with it. As always, before you begin any kind of service to your firearm, please make sure it has been cleared and checked. You need to remove the magazine and the bolt and make sure everything is good to go. You'll need a couple things before you get started. Some thread lock, some good gun grease. I use a small head screwdriver along with a medium-sized flathead screwdriver. Your kit will arrive to you expeditiously and include 2 of the appropriate size hex wrenches, a stainless steel retaining bolt, stainless steel spring, 2 stamped stainless steel shims. One side of the shim is more polished and buffed than the other. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Now finally, let's get on to the installation. Let's begin by removing the 2 bolts on the underside of the firearm. I begin by removing the largest, which is the one in the rear. This holds on your trigger guard. Notice that the trigger guard has a small square appendage. The appendage hooks under the hand grip and gives you the proper orientation for the trigger guard. It also helps hold it firmly in place. Next we move on to the forward bolt, which is the smaller of the 2. Once removed, place them to the side. From here, the entire stock should come free from the barrel and the trigger assembly. Here you see the ever-important recoil lug. So now we have the exposed trigger assembly connected to the barrel. Savage uses a yellow gooey-like substance in order to lock both the safety adjustment screw and your trigger spring. Do not ever attempt to adjust or tamper with the safety screw in any way. It's set from the factory and could be extremely dangerous to you or others if it's out of alignment. The kit includes the shims in order to address the problem of side-to-side wobble. They take up the space between the trigger and the trigger housing, virtually eliminating any wobble. These 2 pins are seated in place by the pressure of the stock. You want to make sure that they don't work free. Now it's time to remove the E-clip. I used a medium-sized screwdriver in order to break it free. Once it's loose, I use the small screwdriver to carefully remove it. Next, I break free the waxy, gooey seal on the trigger spring. I keep looking to make sure those pins did not work loose in any way. Then I apply slight pressure to the trigger mechanism in order to more easily push out the pivot pin. Continue to apply pressure and carefully remove the trigger assembly. This is a great time for you to inspect the trigger for any sort of wear and tear. Next, you will unscrew the old trigger spring. Here's a comparison of the two springs together. There's a tremendous difference between the stiffness of the two springs. It's time to clean out the waxy goo from the trigger. I'm using the trigger spring bolt in reverse in order to clear all the threads from the wax. Back out your bolt and clean up your area. It's time for the shims. When I first looked at the shims, I noticed that they were stamped, which means that one side was more rounded than the other. So what I decided to do was place the more rounded side towards the trigger and the sharper, rougher side towards the housing. Apply a liberal amount of grease to the shims so that they stick to the trigger while you're manipulating them. You can always wipe the excess off later. Now we insert the spring retaining bolt. Notice the proper orientation. I place a good amount of thread lock onto the bolt. You then want to screw in the bolt all the way flush. Snug tightly, but don't overdo it. Then we place on the spring. Just a note to save you some time and trouble. This was the point of the installation that I had to return to, because I wasn't quite satisfied with the final trigger pull weight. My mean trigger pull was 2.49 pounds, and it was a little too light for me. So I stretched the spring a little bit, and I got it to go to a 3.29, and I was pretty happy with that. I eventually ended up with the 3.58, and I left it there. If I were you, I would try the trigger spring as is. You can always go back later and readjust. Finally, it's time for reassembly. I had a little bit of a hard time trying to reinstall the shims with the trigger. I rocked it back and forth a little bit and it went in. I inserted the small screwdriver into the hole in order to better align the shims. Now, upon inserting the pin, I had to rock the trigger back and forth, and finally, the pin fell in. Then I wipe off the excess grease. Now it's time to replace the E-ring. Before you put everything back together, make sure that your spring is in the proper place. Your trigger's in place and it moves freely, and everything looks good. Recheck those pins on the other side. Make sure they're still intact. And now it's time to reattach it to the stock. It should snap in nicely. You can actually feel where it's mated into the proper position. Mine kinda actually made a little snapping sound. Then install the forward bolt first. That's the smaller bolt. You want to tighten it snugly, just so the barrel doesn't come away from the rest of the stock. Don't crank down on it. Let's go ahead and put in your trigger guard. Remember the little appendage tab? You want to place that in under your hand grip and it'll fall right in. Then place in the longer rear bolt. Before you tighten it down, make sure that everything is in a good position. The barrel looks like it's in place properly. And then give them both another quarter turn. And we're almost done. Yes! Now you can wipe off any excess grease, and let's insert your bolt. After you reinsert your bolt, check your safety. You want to check your safety several times. Make sure it's functioning properly. Go ahead and do a drop function test on your firearm. Now it's time to check the function of your new trigger. Feels good, doesn't it? A little click, click. It feels great. It's such an improvement. Check it another couple times, and you may want to do the ground bump test. Actually take your firearm, engaging your bolt, putting the safety on, and I drop it onto the carpet quite a few times from just above my knee. Make sure that that safety does not come off. Finish cleaning it up, and we're done with the installation. I hope you enjoyed this video and it was helpful for you. Wesbaun Gun Springs Savage Axis Trigger Kit. Please take a look at Wesbaun.com. They're really nice people there. I know they'll take care of you. Wesbaun.com. They have a wide variety of accessories and upgrade kits available. And that's it. And I appreciate you watching the Wesbaun Savage Axis Trigger Kit video. Man, that's a mouthful. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful for you. Please take a look at my other videos. And please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget your local veterans and also our first responders. Remember to keep praying and keep the Lord first always. Keep praying for our president and our people. I hope to see you soon.